God of mercy, who answers the poor, answer us. God of mercy, who answers the brokenhearted, answer us. God of mercy, pity us. God of mercy, save us. Before we conclude the Silichot section of our first section of Silichot over the course of Yom Kippur, to share some words of Torah. One year, on this very day, the eve of Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the Jewish calendar, a few of the students asked the great Reb Elimelech of Lizhensk how they were to properly prepare themselves for Yom Kippur. They came to their Hasidic master expecting a deep spiritual response, but they were surprised then when he told them he wasn't the right person to ask. Instead, he suggested that they go to the house of the local shoemaker and watch how he prepared himself. The students made their way over to the home of Moshe the shoemaker to see what the secret was. There they found Moshe sitting around the table with his family, eating one last meal before Yom Kippur. They stayed a little longer, and following the meal, the shoemaker turned to his children and said, "The great moment has arrived. Get me the books." His children hurried to a nearby drawer and brought out a small notepad and a larger notebook to their father, who was seated at the table. The shoemaker pulled the small notebook close to him and said, "God, it is me again, Moshe the shuster, the shoemaker. I want to read you something. This little notepad contains a list of my sins." He opened the notebook and began to read. "I didn't treat some people in my community with respect. I wasn't as honest in business as I could have been. I spoke badly about others. I broke Shabbos. I wasn't a good husband. I wasn't a good father." Then he pulled out the big notebook and said, "Now, God, this is a book of your sins. A mother in our community lost her only child to cancer. Master of the world, you broke our hearts. Everywhere I turn, I see sadness. I see people without homes, people overcome with sickness. That's not fair. I see conflict and war. Thousands of innocent people are being killed. That's a crime. There are people suffering and struggling to get by each day, orphans and widows in so much pain. How could you do that?" When he finished reading through the notebook containing everything he could think of that was wrong and unjust in the world, he stopped and said, "Dear God, it's the eve of Yom Kippur. I'll tell you what. If you forgive me, I'll forgive you." It has been a painful time and a scary time. We have often worried about ourselves and our loved ones, about the welfare of our Jewish community, and so many communities that have continued to face discrimination and hardship, including groups that have been more at risk from the coronavirus, without adequate protection from our healthcare system, elderly, people with disabilities and chronic health conditions, racial minorities, many more. We've noticed many extreme weather events. Increasingly, we are concerned about a planet succumbing to human-made climate change. Living through this period of instability and global pandemic has taught us once again that we are all vulnerable. Now, the guidelines and realities on the ground have shifted. We've moved through waves of distancing, quarantining, testing, masking, unmasking, remasking, vaccinations, school closings, reopenings, closings, and reopenings. All have been constant, tangible reminders of the fragility of our lives and our institutions. And in the midst of it, we have all faced a myriad of challenges, and we've made choices each day to ensure our safety and well-being and that of our families. Imagine, if you could, go back to Yom Kippur 2 years ago and look at ourselves today. I think we might be surprised to learn about some of the choices that we made. We did the best we could. And today, as we look soberly and honestly at how we responded to the challenges we faced, let's find some compassion for ourselves. Let's enter into the work of Yom Kippur with love, patience, and gentleness for ourselves. And then let's turn that compassion to those around us, and maybe even to God. In a time defined by this pandemic and the awareness of bodily illness, it feels appropriate to direct our compassion first toward our own bodies. In fact, the rules of Yom Kippur are designed to help us focus on our bodies. It is customary on this day not to bathe, apply creams, wear leather, engage in physical intimacy, or to eat and drink. We also have a custom to wear white garments, such as this kittel, which resemble tachrichin, the simple white shrouds in which Jews are buried. It is as if we are rehearsing our death, play-acting our mortality. The marathon of cascading words, the cycle of sitting and standing and swaying as we are able, and the rigors of fasting, or if we are not fasting due to health considerations, the keen awareness that comes with that choice. All these sensitize us to our own bodies and their particularities. And for those of us for whom fasting is not a healthy and safe practice for any reason, I want to draw your attention to print out over at the entry table next to the machzorim. On these sheets, you will find a meditation for those who cannot fast on Yom Kippur by my teacher, Rabbi Simcha Weintraub. We move through the world in bodies. So much of our experience of the world is mediated through this singular experience. Yet many of us take these bodies for granted, going through our everyday routines without attention to our bodies as bodies until we encounter a disruption to their orderly function. And when we do encounter such moments, when we experience serious illness or injury, for example, the thin veil that keeps at bay awareness of our mortality is suddenly lifted. Most of us don't walk around thinking about the fact that one day our lives will end. And for good reason. As the psychotherapist Irvin Yalom writes, we know about death. Intellectually, we know the facts, but we, that is, the unconscious portion of the mind that protects us from overwhelming anxiety, have split off or dissociated the terror associated with death. We know that if we learn to embrace this basic fact of our existence, to relate to it differently, that same awareness becomes not only bearable, but illuminating. Yom Kippur offers us a small taste of that awareness, of that illumination. Inevitably, this day calls us back to our bodies to examine with compassion how we cope when we can't just take our bodies for granted. Acknowledging our mortality, we are drawn to appreciate the beauty and meaning in life and to connect to the infinite source of life with every breath we have. Today, we sit together in community and face the truth that each of us is vulnerable. Each of us is mortal. Haven't we been asked to face this truth every day of the past 18 months? And for those of us who live with chronic illness and other sorts of bodily disruptions, for those whose bodies don't fit the narrow norms that our society is designed to accommodate, what of us? How is Yom Kippur any different? The answer is that Yom Kippur is about more than vulnerability. This day throws into relief the basic contours of our human condition, which according to our Jewish wisdom are shaped by a dynamic tension between our mortality and our connection to the Eternal One. There are two sides of the same coin. We are bodies, and we are also, each of us, a piece of eternity. We are souls that are connected to the infinite source of life. Another reason given for why we abstain from some bodily practices on this day is to affirm this, that yes, we are bodies and we are so much more. I ask you, on this Yom Kippur, how can you learn to treat ourselves and our bodies with care and compassion, to honor the particularities and the needs of our holy, God-given bodies that are unique manifestations of the divine in whose image we are created? Collectively, can we affirm that our sacred community and the larger communities of which we are a part are made up of a wide range of bodies, each with different abilities and vastly different ways of moving through and experiencing the world, and that each one of those is also a unique manifestation of the divine image? We make space for fullness of God's presence in the world to the extent that we make space for the full variety of people with all of our differences. And in the spirit of Isaiah, whose prophetic call in the Haftarah we will read tomorrow at the center of our morning service, we are also called to account for the ways that the systems that represent and serve us continue to serve some of us more than others. And so in practice, tacitly value the bodies, indeed the lives of some people more than others. Whether it's the justice system or the healthcare system, it is upon us to consider how our society perpetuates discrimination on the basis of our differences, whether those differences be in physical or cognitive ability, race, class, gender, sexuality, religion, or otherwise. This year, how are we going to address these iniquities? As Isaiah reminds us, as important as personal change is, it must go hand in hand with systemic change. Earlier tonight, we opened our service with Kol Nidre, this dramatic scene of coming before a Beit Din, a court of law, to request the annulment of our vows, whether they were intentional or thoughtless habits. And the prayer leader tonight. That was me. He was playing the role of the court's representative. Opened the scene with a brief statement granting the community to pray together with the avaryanim. Avaryanim, that word is typically translated to mean transgressors. So the prayer leader is declaring before God and the congregation, all are welcome to join this group in prayer, saints and sinners alike. More specifically, if we think about it, it gives us permission to pray alongside them, the sinners. It's a challenging statement. Who is the us and who is the them? Who is the subject and who is the object? In the words of Ecclesiastes, surely there is not one righteous person on earth who does only what is good and never errs. Despite our shortcomings, or maybe because of them, each one of us, as Rabbi Annie taught to open the evening, belongs here in this sacred space tonight. Okay, this is teaching us that none of us is complete on our own. We find wholeness only in coming together as a community, each with our own gifts and shortcomings, each one of our voices and experiences a necessary thread in the tapestry of prayer we are weaving together this Yom Kippur. Another way to understand Avaryanim, I learned from the late Rabbi Alan Liu, who taught, it's from the word la'avor, to pass. Avaryanim means we're all just passing through. We are all, every one of us, impermanent. And read this way, the opening declaration serves to lift up the leading motif of Yom Kippur, our mortality. We are each imperfect, and we are impermanent, and we are also each a unique manifestation of the infinite God. We are all imperfect, impermanent, and we all contain sparks of the divine. We need each other. As the rabbis taught, Kol Yisrael arevim zeh lazeh, our lives and our destinies are bound up with one another. So I will leave you with a blessing that I hope can set the tone for the rest of our day. This year, may we continue to choose the path of life, to savor this one wild, precious, and passing life, to remain committed to personal growth and accountability. May we learn to love and nurture our bodies and our souls, and in so doing, to value and honor our differences. May our presence only heal and never hurt others in this world. This year, may we find wholeness with one another. Gemar Chatima Tova.